Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Bacon. Welcome to the show, y'all. COVID didn't come into the joint like a riot. It came in like a rumor. At first, it was just something on the TV in the day room, anchors in suits talking fast about numbers and curves and shutdowns. Whole cities going quiet. Dudes in here laughed at it. Man, the world finally catching up to how we live every day, somebody said. Another dude joked, they on lockdown now. We trendsetters. Everybody thought it was funny until the first CO showed up with a mask on that didn't match his face. You learn to read small changes in here. A new rule on the board. A second clipboard at the officer's station. Gloves on hands that used to be bare. When medical started walking the tier more than once a day, I knew this wasn't TV news anymore. It was reality leaking through the cracks. They started taking our temperatures like we was inventory. Infrared guns to the forehead, beep, move on. Dudes started coughing and everybody would stop mid-sentence and stare like the sound was a weapon. In the middle of all it was Darren Lowe. Darren wasn't a monster, but he wasn't a pushover. Medium built, dark skinned, always had this half smirk like he didn't trust anything you said, but he'd still hear you out. Ran a little side hustle on the unit, tobacco, a little weed, some extra snacks when the store ran dry. He wasn't top dog, but he had enough clout that young dudes gave him space and old heads gave him head nods. His celly, Jamari Richardson, was the opposite. Late 20s, slim, eyes too open for prison, like he still expected something good to walk through the door by mistake. Came in on a short sentence, well, short for here, couple of years on a drug case. He still had that free world softness in him, still said yes sir to COs and excuse me when he bumped into people like manners was armor. When the pandemic hit the news, Jamari was shook from day one. You could see it in how he moved. He started washing his hands more than the water schedule really allowed, using that cheap prison soap like it was some medical grade sanitizer. He'd wipe his bunk rail with his sleeve, wipe down the table before he played cards, turn his head whenever somebody coughed near him. Darren clowned him for it. Man, if COVID come in here, it's gonna turn around and leave, he said one day in the day room. You seen this place? Virus gonna be like, nah, I can't survive in that. Guys laughed, slapped tables, co-signed like fear was a joke they were too cool to laugh at fully. But jokes always come before reality in here. That's how we ease into the truth. We laugh at it first. Couple weeks went by. They canceled visits, shut down programs. Chapel got limited. They started talking modified movement, which is just a fancy way of saying you even more stuck now than before. Then one night, while the unit was dark and still, I heard it. I was laying on my bunk, hands behind my head, listening to the usual soundtrack, snoring, toilets flushing, somebody whispering through the vent, the low hum of a fan somebody wasn't supposed to have. Then I heard a cough. Not a clear your throat cough, not a eyes swallowed wrong cough. A deep, heavy cough that sounded like it came from the bottom of somebody's spine. I sat up. The sound echoed just enough that you could tell it was coming from a specific cell, not just floating in the air. I listened again. There it was. Same heavy rasp, same struggle. At the end, like the air didn't want to move. I knew that sound wasn't nothing to play with. Next morning at chow, I saw who it belonged to. Darren walked into the line slower than usual. He wasn't talking trash, wasn't laughing, just holding his tray with both hands like it weighed more than plastic should. When he sat down, you could see his forehead had this faint shine of sweat, even though it wasn't hot like that. I slid my tray next to his. You good? He didn't look up right away. Yeah, he muttered. Just tired. Tired don't sound like that, I said. You was coughing last night like you trying to drag gravel out your lungs. He finally glanced up, irritation in his eyes. Joe, I said I'm straight. Y'all old dudes catch one little cough and think the world over. Across from him, Jamari was just poking at his eggs with the edge of his spork, not eating, eyes cutting between me and Darren. I looked at him. How you holding up, young blood? He shrugged, but his shoulders were too tight. I'm cool, he lied. Just, you know, trying not to get sick. Darren snorted. Boy, you in prison. You been sick since you came through that gate. They got a couple chuckles from the tables nearby. Laughter's cheap in here. You can buy it with any line that distracts from the truth. Later that morning, medical rolled through with their little cart. Nurse with a clipboard, CO behind her with keys, mask hanging under his nose like he didn't believe in it fully. They hit each cell door. Any cough? Any fever? Laser thermometer to the forehead. Beep. Next door. I was wiping down the table near Darren and Jamari's cell. Just close enough to hear without looking like I was ear hustling the nurse. How y'all feeling in there? Jamari was standing up near the door. I saw his fingers flex against his leg. He hesitated. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. Then he looked back at Darren. Darren was sitting on his bunk, elbows on his knees, head slightly down, but eyes locked on Jamari. No words. Just that stare. That prison stare to say, don't you play with me? Jamari's shoulders dropped a little. We good, he said. Voice low, flat. The nurse nodded, scribbled something, moved on, and with each door she passed, I felt this invisible weight settle heavier in the air. That night at the sink, Jamari came up beside me. He wasn't brushing his teeth, just running water over the toothbrush, staring at nothing. You believe in this virus for real? He asked, voice barely above the faucet. I believe in lungs, I said, and I believe in how it sounds. He swallowed. He getting worse. At night, he'd be sweating through the sheet. Sometimes he'd wake up gasping. But he keeps telling me, if you say anything to medical, I'ma beat you so bad, you ain't gonna need the virus to die. I let that sit between us a moment. You scared of him or scared of the sickness? Both, he said honestly. I ain't gonna lie. I ain't built for no hospital wing in chains, and I ain't built for getting jumped neither. In here, none of us built for most of this, I told him. You adapt or you fold, but there's one thing you gotta know. Whatever you decide, you're gonna have to live with it. Even if living means breathing through a machine. And he looked at me then, really looked, not like a kid, like a man who wanted somebody else to make the choice for him. I didn't give him that. That's the one thing I learned in this place. You don't rob a man of his decisions, even when they ugly. Talk to him again, I said. Not scared, not begging, just tell him straight. I'm sharing a shoebox with you. If you sick, I got a right to not drown with you. See what he says when you talk like you a man and not a hostage. Jamari nodded, but I could see his hands still shaking. Next day I watched little things. How Darren walked, how often he coughed, how he'd lean against the rail just a second longer than usual after climbing the stairs. He tried to play it off, still talking crazy in the day room when he had the energy. Y'all letting them scare you with a cold, he said. I done had staph. I done had flu. I done ate meatloaf in this joint. If that didn't kill me, some coronavirus ain't gonna do it. But even while he was cracking jokes, he stopped mid-sentence sometimes like he forgot where his breath was. Late that afternoon, I saw him and Jamari back in the cell, door open for day room. Jamari was standing by the desk, hands on the edge, voice low. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. I'm saying it ain't right, man. I'm right there next to you. I don't want to go out like that. Darren's voice came back sharper. You want to leave? Tell the CO you scared and check in. I ain't no lab rat. They not finna stick me in some box and poke me every 6 hours. I'll die right here smelling this same musty ass mattress before I let them treat me like I'm contagious trash. It ain't just about you, Jamari said a little stronger. You cough on that bunk, it's on my bunk. You cough in that toilet area, it's in my lungs. Everything you touch, I touch. There was a pause, and I could almost feel the tension pressing out the door. Then Darren said, quieter but way more dangerous, say another word to medical. And I promise you, you ain't gonna be scared of no virus. You gonna be scared of me. That right there, that's not a conversation. That's a verdict I walked off before they saw me watching. Some things you don't stare at too long if you ain't ready to step in them. A couple days passed. Darren kept getting worse. His cough got thicker, his steps slower, his patience shorter. He'd snap at COs, curse under his breath in line, sit down in the day room and just stare at the TV like his mind was somewhere else. By then, the unit had heard enough to put things together. Dudes started giving him extra space. They slide away from him on the bench, move to another table if he sat down, not because they didn't know him, but because they were scared of what was living in his chest. Fear spreads fast in a closed system. Then came the day they did another big medical sweep. Nurse and CO came back with a list in her hand this time, not just that little thermometer gun. You could tell by the way she moved that this wasn't just routine anymore. This was targeted. They had numbers, names, a plan. I was sitting at the table in the day room, sorting my little stack of letters, but my eyes were on their path. Door pop. Any symptoms? Beep, scribble, move on. They got closer and closer to Darren and Jamari's cell. By the time they reached that door, the whole tier energy shifted. Conversations dipped. TV noise faded to background. That's how you know something important is happening in here. Everything else gets quieter without anyone deciding to make it quiet. The nurse stopped at their cell. Either of you feeling any new or worse symptoms? Cough, fever, trouble breathing? Jamari was standing in the middle of the cell, hands clenched at his sides. Darren was on the bunk, hunched forward, eyes cold, jaw tight. I watched Jamari go through 3 emotions in about 2 seconds. Fear, panic, and something that looked a lot like surrender. He opened his mouth and shut it. Looked at Darren. Darren didn't say anything. He just stared at him like a loaded weapon, laying on a table, safety off. And right there, I realized this wasn't about COVID to that man. This was about control. About not letting anyone decide what happened to him. Not the state, not the virus, not the kid sleeping 6 feet away. The silence stretched. Nurse shifted her weight, impatient. Sir, are either of you having symptoms? Jamari took a breath that looked like it hurt. And this time, instead of looking at Darren, he looked straight at the nurse. Yes, he said, and I'm scared. He been coughing all week. He up at night sweating, breathing hard. I share that room with him. I think he got it. The tear went dead quiet. Darren stood up so fast he almost stumbled. You lying little... CO stepped right between them, hand already on his baton. Nah, Lo, back up. Darren's eyes burned holes through Jamari's face. If you think this over, he growled, you dumb. You just signed something you don't even know about. Nurse raised her voice professional again. Both of you step out. We're taking you to medical. Now. They cuffed them both, not because they were under arrest again, but because that's what they do when they move men in fear and sickness in the same walk. As they marched past my table, Jamari's eyes caught mine. He looked like his whole insides was shaking. Not proud and not relieved, not even sure, just terrified. And right then, I knew this was bigger than some virus. He didn't just report a sick man. He went against the law of survival. Most of us get taught in here. Don't say nothing that ain't your business and don't bring the law to nobody's door. He just broken that law in front of everybody for his life, for his lungs, for a chance not to drown 2 bunks away from where he wrote letters to his mama. And what comes after a choice like that? In prison, that's where the real story begins. They walked Darren and Jamari out of the unit like they were radioactive. Not loud, not dramatic, just that slow march where the whole tier holds its breath like sickness might float out behind them and settle on whichever bunk is unlucky enough to catch it. As soon as the door clanked shut, dudes started talking again, but quieter this time, like the air had rules. "That boy done snitched," somebody whispered. "Nay, he ain't gonna last." Another said, "Hey, I kept wiping my table even though it was already clean." Sometimes your hands need something to do when your head already knows too much. A CO came through 30 minutes later and locked half the tier down for sanitation, which is code for we don't know what's going on yet, so everybody sit still before we lose control. I went back to my cell and sat on my bunk while the unit hummed with low conversations, fears, and every rumor a man could invent to feel like he had answers. 2 hours passed. Then medical came back, this time with a bigger card, more masks, more gloves. The nurse stopped at my door. "Have you had close contact with either of the 2 inmates we just escorted?" I shrugged. "In here? Everybody got close contact with everybody." She nodded like she expected that. They scanned my forehead again. Beep. Normal. But when she walked away, the CO lingered a second. "You hear anything about how that started?" he asked, like he was fishing. "Nope," I said, and he studied my face before moving on. Because that's what this place becomes during fear. A maze of people desperate to assign blame to something they can point at. Later that night, the unit felt hollow. Too quiet, too many empty spaces where noise should be, too many men pretending they weren't paranoid, lights dim, doors locked, and that heavy nighttime silence rolled down the tier like cold water. Then around midnight, I heard footsteps, soft ones, not CO boots, inmate slippers, voices whispered outside my cell. "He really told on him." "Yeah, medical said he was honest." "Man, he done." I stayed still because this wasn't about eavesdropping. This was about understanding the temperature of the room. And right now the temperature was anger. Jamari wasn't even back yet, but the unit had already decided his future. Next morning, COS came through with clipboards again. "Pack up Richardson's stuff," they said. "No return to this unit until medical clears him." When they dragged out his property bag, you could feel every eye following it. But here's the thing nobody said out loud. It wasn't the virus they were scared of. Not really. They were scared of what Darren would do when he came back. Because men like Darren don't let things go. Sickness or not, he was going to remember who opened their mouth. And prison keeps receipts. By early afternoon, word filtered in through the grapevine. Darren had tested positive. Jamari was being observed. That meant isolation. That meant 2 men locked in 2 different rooms with nothing but time and the consequences of what had already happened. All evening, the unit felt heavier. People stopped playing cards, stopped laughing, stopped standing too close together. That night, I laid back on my bunk and stared up at the ceiling, listening to the quiet like it was trying to teach me something. You learn a lot in prison, but one thing you learn quicker than anything else is this. When a man chooses between fear of sickness and fear of another inmate, the consequences always come back. Eventually, I didn't know when Darren would be released from medical. I didn't know when Jamari might show up again. All I knew was this. When they did, the whole unit was going to hold its breath again. And nobody knew what would break first, that the virus or the peace. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. And I say peace, y'all.